Enho's horrific dreams and their connotations continue.
And there's interesting symbolism with that due to the kanji used in the title for this in the last episode being the same character. The first episode of this arc tying more into the interpretation of this being an imagined dream, and then transitioning more and more into a nightmare of reality when the line between them is broken. And that kanji can be interpreted as both meaning dream and nightmare. Even when I don't like this show, I freaking love this show.
Nonetheless, the dreams leave her ridiculously high-strung, her boyfriend Yoshitomi trying to get her to relax, only for her to shrug him off. Meanwhile, with Team Barai, they meet as, despite entire days having passed, they still haven't been able to pin and destroy the radio horror Danta.
You guys are seriously bad at this. At least 4, maybe 5, days have passed simply from the Enho side of this plot.
Especially as they are only now being shown an already existing Mado tool that can help them track it through the radios it uses to escape from them, which presumably Zaruba would be able to help them with. But he's not. Nor is, oddly, Rianne, who should arguably have been their original backup plan when trying to confront it, as she could raise a barrier that could prevent its escape. Instead, she is off drinking with Enho again, Rianne paralleling Yoshitomi's words about the best ways to get Enho to relax. Though all that does is segue into Enho expositing about herself, on her wanting to become a strong person because... not explained. Just craving power since she was little, but without a why to it essential for that dialogue to not be pretentious.
Because damn it, everything is gay about this!
Bound to pop up with that gag. Enho is dragged away from Booze Night with an emergency call-in relating to the exact same horror the Knights are tracking, leading Takeru and Aguri to have to evade those patrols, and leaving Ryuga alone to confront it, all while Enho and Yoshitomi are the only witnesses. But Enho finds this incident mimics perfectly one of her dreams, and as Yoshitomi is injured in the crossfire, she finds an unthought of instinct is now overwhelming her. The dreams were prophetic of her conversion into a Mado horror, and we were witnesses to when she was infested. The Prior Knight's dreams a showcasing of her slow conversion, indicative of the strong soul now subjugated with the instinctual need to feed, this having been the final stage to her full awakening. And with that knowledge, she betrays Ryuga, sicking the entirety of the SG on him, and framing him for Yoshitomi's murder. This episode closing by using the same cinematography from the last episode to show Enho's perspective as she greets Rianne for another night of drinking. The callback all the more dread-inducing.
I honestly don't know how to feel about this. On one hand, this removes the normal human perspective contrasting the fantastical world the series showcases. On the other, this really is a consequence of Ryuga not understanding the secrecy their mission serves with respect to keeping people out of the mess with horrors. But it also complements the show with how Mado horrors really can be anyone, even those you think you can trust.
Takeru is shown fighting, the Beast Dopant from Kamen Rider Double, When amidst the battle, it's re-energized by the playing of music!
I only have myself to blame for that.
It ends up kicking Takeru's ass before fleeing, them checking on the source of the music, a kid named Shin, who happens to have an oddly glowing guitar pick that is his own personal lucky charm. With Takeru once more made to be the show's butt monkey, the others are left to investigate this kid, finding horrors in the crowd of his performances also being massively energized in the same way the audience finds the thrill from him playing.
Garo, while not using it religiously, has showcased that music enhanced through mystical means causes an invigoration of one's spirit. This seen previously with both of Rekka's focused stories, and to an extent the utilization of the show's ongoing soundtrack. But it's a bit more of an ever-present detail in Yami wo Terasu Mono.
Constantly through the series, the angel statue releases this oddly echoing aria which shows itself to have a calming or hypnotic effect on the populace, it influencing those with Makai or horror powers differently than everyone else. And this episode serves the purpose of introducing the idea that those with special artifacts can also have such an influencing factor through expressions of music, as Shin's guitar pick is a horror scale. Thus Ryuga tries to take it from him, only for Shin to resist, as ever since he found it, his talent,
which is really damn good, by the way,
is finally being recognized, and he's on the cusp of his 15 minutes of fame with a record deal.
俺の命をかけてるんだ。死んじゃえだよ。母さん、目を開けてくれよ。すぐなんだよ。俺がデビューすんの。命がけか。Useless ass psychic powers!
Nonetheless, Ryuga has to take it. As if he ever recorded anything using it, the recording would nonetheless have the same ability as the live performance does to invigorate horrors, as it would still resonate with the strengthening of their spirit.
Which is exactly why he asks Barai if he can return the pick to Shin just so he can get his first song recorded.
While it's trying to show Ryuga's compassion and shortcuts to understanding others with his useless Esper ability, it's really damn stupid for him to do this and potentially risk others' lives, and not made any better by the episode then siding with him, and the music producer having this to say about Shin's unassisted musical ability.
全然ダメ。こんな後に付き合ってる時間がもったいないよ。
What performance were you listening to? This kid could out-soundtrack Gnome Keneal. Granted, that isn't hard, but it's still praiseworthy.
Nonetheless, they return the scale, using this as a chance to attract and slay a mass of Inga horrors by playing the performance over speakers, which draws them like moths to flames. Though many of them are dressed in Spencer's Halloween masks in ways that make me think they were all rejects of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, instead of anything that's supposed to be like a horror.
This is where we come to the tertiary factor that helps undermine the series alongside the three major narrative issues. The contradiction of their utilization of effects and monsters for the horrors. It really seems this series that they took this interesting, dark, malevolent eldritch force and turned them even more into just generic mooks or monsters indistinguishable from any other medium. Like, take this CGI effect that they used for most of the series to depict Inga horrors. That doesn't make me think of Garo's monsters, that makes me think of the Reavers from Blade 2! And don't get me wrong, I love Blade 2, it's a great movie! But it's not Garo! It's not how they've depicted their horrors before this or following this. And for how they use it in the show, it's a straight-up cop-out for actually doing anything, well, horrific with the Inga horrors, who never leave human form.
No, really. No Inga horror that possesses a human body ever assumes any type of horror form. Not even the generic ones. And this is probably, in part, due to the series at no point actually making any suits of any type. Any horror Makai armor seen in this series is entirely done in badly rendered, blatantly noticeable CGI.
CGI, mind you, that is more poorly rendered than pretty much anything else in the franchise.
And at only about 3 points in the show do we actually see the generic Inga horror suits, but only in instances where a gate for them forms, and they haven't taken a body yet. Even most of the Mado horrors have the same design to them, outside of the generals.
But because they're all CGI, it massively reduces the use of those forms to just a few seconds of screen time, effectively making them curb stomp battles that, yeah, are not a good thing to see in any action show like this, and have been part of my condemnations directed towards other Tokusatsu properties with how bad their action scenes have been getting. Case in point, Q Ranger and Ghost.
Admittedly, Yami or Terasu Mono never gets that bad, as the majority of the fights are still done practically with mostly good choreography, but they're lacking the coup de grace of the conflict and its escalation. Admittedly, an argument can be made that this is instead this team being ridiculously efficient with their utilization of the armor time limit, which could be seen as them being ridiculously skilled to not need it that much. And I'd agree with that, if it didn't seem more like the same afterthought that has been gutting enjoyment of the higher profile members of the big Toku franchises.
Though again, they're clearly mediating the issue, so it's not something that on its own breaks the series. But the isolation of all transformed states to just CGI is simply an exacerbation of other issues in the show. And the quality of that CGI makes it clear that those monsters, well, aren't really there. That's mediated in how Garo normally has CGI accent practical effects instead of replacing them wholesale. And with how it's not repeated after this, it's clear this wasn't a liked element.
I guess it doesn't help that Ryuga once more acts like a dumbass amidst this, insisting the group not cut the transmission as they fight the horrors, which only increases the danger as they're all enhanced to the point the group almost loses. And despite doing everything to not destroy the boy's dream, he then just destroys the boy's dream by smashing the computer with the completed recording after he's done. And Shin is just okay with it? The hell? There's no impetus for this sudden change, and him now wanting to make his career without any shortcuts.
Riku Sanjo has done this story better for Toei on at least 3 separate occasions. This entire subplot makes it seem like it was eating its own tail as it went nowhere.
But enough about that, let's focus on a story about the horrors, of immigration, with the Suzaki family coming into the town with the promise of a new life in this wondrous place. Yes, nothing has got them down, except for the eldest daughter Rui, who thinks this is all a scam.
She is, of course, correct.
The mother and grandmother in this always seemed off to me. I have never met anyone in real life this uncharacteristically optimistic, and the fact they seem to go from city to city with all their belongings in search of their own personal paradise without even, doing the responsible thing and trying to check out or possibly find employment in that region first is just strange. You don't move before you have a plan to move, especially when there are children involved. And yet, the one who's reacting realistically is treated as a pessimist as opposed to her family that are ignoring it. And sure enough, the universe punishes their oblivious naivete by them all being immediately suckered into the plot of Hideyuki, a Mado horror real estate speculator.
Further proving Akira Toriyama's declaration that they are the worst kind of people.
Who has made his own feeding den out of one specific abandoned home he showcases to the newcomers to town, proving their application for immigration, and then eating them.
No wonder the population rent is so low. Not only is the town an all-you-can-eat buffet, but they're gobbling up people trying to move here. Hell, going after the immigrants is amazingly smart, as then they can just pretend they were rejected and turned away, only to disappear outside of the city.
Takeru, however, happens to be the team member sent undercover in this sting, bonding with and in a calmer moment being protective of Rui, trying to warn her into leaving the town. But as she's underage, still at the whims of her mom.
This episode really is the first to even try to focus on Takeru as a character, beyond him being the butt monkey, and it's what begins to show what I said earlier about him trying his best to enjoy life to the fullest, as he's aware of how fleeting it is thanks to facing death by eldritch creatures every day.
But more so that while he regularly beds hot women, as time's moved on, he's found less fulfillment out of it, and this does play into the resultant arc with him, beginning with him finding a zealous need to save Rui and her family, in the confrontation the girl grabbing his charm as they're pulled out. And they tear down this horror and his gloating of how he gave this optimistic family everything. As this is a Mado horror, the gold waves hit Ryuga again, Aguri and Takeru dealing with the lesser horrors.
楽にしてやるよ。
7 freaking episodes it took them to show this, people. They wipe the family's memories, replacing their immigration papers with ones denying them entry to hopefully keep them out of danger, only for a man to stop them upon their exit, and enchant them straight back into the den. The euphoria overwhelming all of them, with only Rui realizing something is wrong. And as Burai's team finds the car later, clearly the victims of the horror attack, Takeru takes this well.
Yeah, there are times where it's clear Junya Ikeda was told to overact, and it's off-putting. I mean, it worked when he was playing Gai Ikari, but Gokaiger was a more upbeat series and it fit the character. Not so much Takeru.
However, Rui managed to survive the attack, the charm still in her hands breaking through the memory suppression spell, and allowed her to escape just as they were taken. They wipe her memory again, setting her up in the city working with a florist, but in doing so, they rob her of the memory of even having a family to begin with. With that then begging the question, is she better off not knowing when what her memories were altered to will leave her believing she was alone all of her life? Or would it have been better that she had known, even with that tragedy, if she could remember the good times with the one she loved? It's a question that goes unanswered, but I think it's one that follows into Takeru's following storyline, as he becomes adherent to looking over and protecting Rui over the course of the series, the guilt of his failure weighing on him, and trying to save her from that solitude through a loose friendship that's probably one of the better parts of the series. But this makes clear to the team that someone isn't just making Mado horrors. They're organized. A photographer named Yatsuto is shown following Ryuga, claiming when confronted to be an ally of his, wanting more details than he's scrounged up on the nature and danger of horrors, which he wants to make public. Which everyone immediately thinks, aside from Ryuga who's a dumbass about this, is a bad idea. Rian showing a dossier on him that he's a reporter who's fallen from grace, and he could just be trying to get back into the limelight. That, however, is not so. Ryuga decide to meet with him again, and find they are not alone. Tosei and Enho also showing for this meeting. And Enho's back to acting like normal?
You framed him for murdering your boyfriend!
Tosei properly introduces himself, pinning the monster attacks as likely being caused by his father, since the others he's seen since all seem to relate to people in power around his dad, and how Kensui has an iron-fisted rule of his city, Yasuto having already connected a string of disappearances and murders to likely supernatural causes. This utopia built on the dead. And his investigation all started by his girlfriend's death, which he witnessed just as he was planning to break open the Kaneshiro scandal a year ago, implying it wasn't random. But still, Ryuga impresses that they're normal humans and can't do anything to affect the outcome, trying to get them to stay out of it and let them do their job, in hopes that eventually Yasuto will get closure. And all of this is reported back to the man that, in the Mado Horror Order, is Enho's superior, the man who turned Rui's family back into town and assisted Enho's turn, Sonshi, and him having ordered Enho to observe Ryuga in hopes of getting to him, and this information facilitates that. For Sonshi plays Yasuto, leading him to another horror attack, which lets him take many photos of the battle with stunt actor Makoto Ito?
I'm not sure if I should put Mr. Secondary Writer Suit Actor on my Toei actor count. Screw it.
But Ryuga is pissed by him just not listening, destroying his camera and demanding he let this go. but Yasuto refuses to listen.
Or Tosei could just get him hired onto Ore Journal and get his news out that way. Dude's got contacts.
No, he takes this to an old friend. The news announcer Rivera, played by Kumi Imura, who some of you may know from the series Madan Senki Ryukendo.
If you've not seen that show, go watch Easy Rider's review of it. It's actually kind of an interesting series.
Rivera looks over all his evidence of monsters among them, and takes the story and runs with it, agreeing to do a special story on this. But as Ryuga and Rien catch wind of this and try to sneak in, it's too late. Rivera going live with her special expose about Ryuga Dogai, serial killer. Also, look at the running caption at the bottom. Skin color yellow?
What a useful description in a city full of Japanese citizens. Also, he really does not look yellow. More of a dark tan. That's why my nickname for Ryuga in this show is Dumbass.
Ryuga's forced on the run. Has she given the authority to shoot to kill? As Yasuto asks Rivera what the hell.
Just come with me for a second. We'll call them alternative facts.
So why has Rivera endorsed fake news? Well, probably because she is a soul-sucking abomination.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything different. Just another worker for Breitbart, InfoWars, and Fox News.
And yes, Rivera is the one who ate his girlfriend. So now, it looks like Yasuto is going to force others to pay the price for his own idiocy. Just as planned. Tosei appears out of nowhere and helps Ryuga escape, temporarily, as instead his next assailant is Sonshi himself, who crashes the car and gloats at how his own cause is falling apart around him.
Useless ass psychic powers!
In their fight, he crushes Ryuga entirely, and even with Takeru and Agri backing him up and the three together armoring up, they are no match in the face of him and his Mado horror powers. It's only from Ryuga getting a glancing blow does the gold wave even erupt from his body, eventually making the man decide to retreat, though not without twisting the metaphorical knife in his gut. This declaration is not as demoralizing as it seems, however, as the light of hope in this situation is still kindled by Tosei surviving the crash, deciding to see this through to the end, even as he asks Tosei to forget all he's seen and go back to his life. A girl named Haruka visits her school at night to retrieve her phone, hearing a horror in the night, and trying to tell her classmates about it the next day, including one of her peers whose dad works for the SG. Mitsuzane Kurashima?
I feel this is quickly becoming an everyone has been on this show franchise. What, next you're going to tell me, I don't know, now Nagasawa is going to show up as a sexy teacher? I am in the Twilight Zone right now!
No, seriously, the second I saw Mahiro Takasugi, I thought to myself, I wonder when Nao Nagasawa is going to cameo. Then BAM! There she is!
She's the horror, isn't she? Because of course! And yet this still ends up a less traumatizing role for her than the 0091 movie. Ugh. That one's on my list, I.O. Aldo.
Mahiro's character Haruki, however, can't help her, even as Haruka begs for him to pass this along to his dad, only for the next day, Haruka to go missing, alongside her entire family. Haruki, the only one that believes something's wrong, and probably not helped by how Ryuga's casing the place, making Haruki think he's responsible. He tries to report this, but all lines to SG are closed and his father, Shadow Moon...
Well, decayed Shadow Moon, which doesn't really count.
Is an unrepentant jackass that doesn't listen to a damn thing he says, as he thinks him a useless failure.
And this is the conduct that in another life causes him to ally with invading aliens before going insane.
消えるしかない。
I'm surprisingly behind on my expected Gaim reference quota. They really didn't use Tsunenori Aoki well in this show.
Thus, the only one that believes Hiroki is Ryuga, who finds him and really sends the wrong message with his tone and attitude in trying to keep this secret. Seriously, that is not a reasonable look. It's almost leering.
Then again, it's Mitsuzane.
He asks what Hiroki saw, presuming there's something he's after that got Haruka killed, and that Ryuga's after it, only for now to come up next and claim to want to help him. So he tells her about Haruka's disappearance.
Hurricane 10 years after is weird. Well, you know what he says.
Now's horror obsession that set this all off? Wanting to make the perfect school. Her killing those who don't meet her expectations.
And this seems more like a Mado horror obsession, and yet she's a normal Inga horror.
Though really, it would have been hilarious had she tried this at Amanogawa. Ryuga kills her with Hiroki lamenting had he been stronger and tried to help Haruka or stood up to his dad, she might not have died. That his friend may have lived had he done things differently.
Well, at least this time you weren't actively responsible, dude.
But Ryuga comforts him as best he can, letting him know there are those out there whose job it is to prevent more victims, and he's one of them. And thanks, when his dad finally does show up, Hiroki defends him from being shot, allowing Ryuga to escape, the story ending with the pair seeming to reconcile, and his class mocking from ignorance the tragedy he's experienced.
This was probably my favorite episode this series, simply from the utilization of the outsider's perspective on this to explore Ryuga from a normal person's view, what you originally thought Enho's role was going to be, and how it would contrast against the propaganda spread about him and his actions. I feel it's kind of a Mark II version of the series pilot as well, and Mahiro Takatsugi really sells his acting chops as the guest viewpoint character that would be utilized just 5 months later excellently in Gaim, albeit in the same way, which makes me beg the question if this got him typecast as well.